CAConrad.
Thank you. I like how you said my name, because I was going to walk to the pace of that. Oh. Thank you. I'm very excited to be here with you today. Thank you. I like that gong, that sound. Do you feel it? So I was going to save this, what I'm about to say. I want to explain a little bit with each image I show, and for the visually impaired who are joining us. So I'm about 6 feet tall, and I'm covered in purple today because, it's flower time. And I was going to save this for a little bit later, but I thought, I'll just talk about it now. So this month is my 50th anniversary of writing poetry, and specifically thank you. Specifically March 30th, and the reason I know that is because in 1975, March 30th was Easter Sunday, at least in the United States. I don't know why that travels around that date. But my mother in 1974 was in trouble with the law a lot. She was a thief and was constantly in. Anyway, she couldn't get work anymore, and she thought it'd be a good idea to put me to work selling flowers along the side of the highway. Now, in the 1970s, there were no phones or laptops, so I became a reader. There was nothing to do out there along the highway except read books. It was many hours every week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And it was Easter Sunday weekend in 75 where I went to get my books to take out for the weekend. And the librarian, who was very important to me, this librarian, because she was constantly guiding me to read different books. And she had on display, where you check out your library books, a copy of a very slender volume of poems by Emily Dickinson. And keep in mind, I'm a very, very young person at this point. And she says, "Do you like Emily Dickinson?" I said, "I have no idea who that is." And I put it in my pile, just to be polite. And when I read all my books, and I wasn't interested in this book. But then on Easter Sunday, that was the last thing that I had to read, and I opened it, and it was just magic. It's just like the gates of heaven open. And I loved it so much, and I kept reading the book over and over again, and started writing almost immediately, and I never looked back. From 1975 to 2005, my poems were primarily on the left margin, and you'll be seeing a few poems in here today, but in 2005, I'll just get this out of the way before I get into talking about what I do. But the other things is that in 2005, I started making friends with students in a creative writing MFA program in the city where I was living at the time. And they were connected internally in a way that I was not. Their writing lives and the lives they were living were connected in a way that I wasn't. It didn't make any sense to me at first. And it took me just a little while to really get to the bottom of it. They were raised by doctors, lawyers, engineers. They come from these kind of families, but all my family were factory workers. And the thing is, the reason why this is important is because when you go to work at a factory for 12 hours a day, at least in the United States, that's what people are working, you become an extension of that machine for most of your waking hours. And it's a terrible thing. And what happens is you need to shut the present off to survive that job. You would absolutely lose your mind if you were present for a machine all day long. So their minds are in the past and the future all day long at work, and they don't know how to switch that, to flip the switch back, to be present, if they ever had that ability. So as a child, I learned this avoidance of the present. So when I realized this was happening in 2005, I started creating these rituals I call somatic poetry rituals, primarily to anchor myself in the present. That was the main goal. So I went on to do many things. So in the 1980s, when I first moved to this city, the AIDS crisis was in full bloom, and I wound up losing like over half of everybody I loved to AIDS when we were all very young, 19, 20, 21 years old. And that plays a big role in everything that I was doing and what led me to where I am today. First of all, the fact that I'm even here to me is a miracle. Having gone to so many funerals as a young person. But it's very exciting to get to 50 years of writing poetry. And I want to, so this is a photograph. Let me just get into this. This is a photograph of on the island of Anafi, Greece. I don't know if you're familiar with Anafi. If you're familiar with the legend of Jason and the Argonauts, Anafi means to reveal. So this is, Jason and the Argonauts were caught in a storm at sea, and the god Apollo, you see these little islands in the background, came down and put a foot on each of those islands and shot an arrow into the sky to part the clouds, to reveal Anafi, to reveal. So it became a place of shelter. It then became a place of refuge for pirates for centuries, and then in World War II, it's where many of the communists during World War II would escape the Nazis. And now there's within the last few years, there's been a monument built on Anafi for the Communist Party. In this photograph, that for those of you who need me to describe it, there's a sunflower overlooking one of the islands where Apollo stepped out. And I have just a couple pictures of the cats. I just thought you might want to see the cats. There's just these cats. They don't really belong to any humans. There's hundreds and hundreds of them, and people are brushing them every morning, and feeding them and taking care of them, and they're very happy cats. So I was there with this group last summer called Phenomenon, a group of artists, and I worked with a translator, Cristali. She's dynamite. I just love her. And she translated my poems that were on QR codes into Greek. And I'm actually going to be going back to Athens in a few weeks because she translated a book of mine. But this is one of my poems. The thing I wanted to say, though, is that my poems, after 2005, after I began using these rituals, started taking shape. They become little creatures. And you'll be seeing just a few of them later on. This one is... Well, I wanted them to be sort of human-sized or bigger than human, because my idea is that I absolutely believe what the poets have been saying for thousands of years about the muse, about ghosts and spirits, that they whisper to the artists to give them ideas and help them in their translation from their internal world out onto the page. And I believe this is true, and I have a show that just ended in Tucson, Arizona at the MoCA, where the poems were the size I really wanted them for the first time, 6 and 9 feet tall, because I feel like these spirits are just a little bit bigger than we are. And you want me to read this one? I can get close enough. Oh, so this poem, by the way, it was published by the Ann Boyer in the New York Times, which is very fancy. But the day that it was published, she wrote to me, she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry people are trashing you online." I was like, "Oh, let me see. I don't care." And it was these grumpy old men saying, "You don't know how to write," blah, and they're like rewriting my poem in the comment stream. I'm gonna write back to each of them, "Thank you, Daddy. Your poor wife." Seriously. We stopped studying the night sky for directions. If someone said we made it up, planet Earth isn't real, we would try to verify, try to be sure. Critics are the evidence we do not trust ourselves. I'm having a hard time reading it. Your imagination is asking for parole. What is your verdict, warden? Try to always remember the calendar made of light our ancestors followed to pass the year. So while I was at Anafi, I made friends with this publisher named David, and I want to talk to you a little bit about this extraordinary book that he's just published that is perfect for this festival. It's called Machine Paralysis, and the part I want to talk about in particular is called The Mechanic. So I'm showing images now, for those who need me to describe them, of sponges from the sea. And there are deep sea divers. These pictures are from the 1970s. That on the outer islands that they made a living deep sea diving to gather sponges to sell. And sometimes, this is another photograph of one of the divers going into the water. Sometimes they would get this, the disease, it's called the bends, it's called many different things, when you come up too quickly. And what can sometimes happen is that sometimes people die from it, and sometimes it leaves you paralyzed partially. And the reason I want to talk about this is because the thing that struck me the most about this village, where the sponge divers all work, is that they have this dance. This is the dance. It's called the Mechanic. And if one of the men comes back paralyzed partially, the village gathers together and they do a special dance for him to welcome his new body. And it usually starts off, the dance, with a younger man who's dancing in front of him as though this is the younger version of this man, or the more agile, younger person. And then he flies away over the fire, and then he reveals the man with the cane. And everybody gets to now love this person with their new way of walking. And I think it's just remarkable to have a whole village come together and honor your body the way it is now. And I think about that coming from the United States, especially right now, which is very hard on anybody with a disability, anybody who's different at all, but especially people with any kind of disability. It's been a struggle, nonstop struggle for years to get the simplest things for people to just get accessibility into a store, onto a bus for that matter. I want to, I encourage you to look at the videos of the Mechanic. It's quite an extraordinary dance. And I wanted to segue into talking about a friend of mine who passed away from AIDS years ago. And it's funny, before cell phones, I didn't have a way of making videos or taking pictures. You had to own a camera. And, people did own cameras, of course, but I didn't own one. So I think about all these people that I knew, and I wish that I did have a camera. But his name is Darian. We were both 22 years old, and he was a dancer. And my friend Marie and I, we would get up every morning and we would call our friends, our sick friends, and see who needed groceries, because sometimes they were so sick they couldn't get out at all. And then before we went to work, we would run around the city getting things for people. And Darian needed, and sometimes help them get to the doctor's office. And Darian needed to go to the doctor's office this one day. And I will always remember this. It reminds me of the Mechanic, the dance I just told you about. This is a young man who loved dancing more than anybody I'd ever met. And he said to me, we were going to pick him up and drive him. He's like, no, I want CA to walk with me. So I came extra early because it was going to take a bit of time. And as we were walking, he was saying to me, I just really want you to know I'm still a dancer. I know my body's covered in sores, and I'm really slow, and it's painful, and I have a hard time breathing, but I'm still, and he would stretch out his arms, and he would say, look, I can, all these things he can still do. And then we came across a little flower box that somebody had been growing flowers. The flowers were all blue, but there was this one flower that was like wasn't supposed to be there, I guess. You know, the seed, a bird left the seed, and it was this long stem of a flower with a bright yellow flower at the end of it, just sort of like above the others, like, hey, you know. I was like, that's your doppelganger. That's you, Darian. And he would say, stand back. And he did this beautiful dance with this flower that went on for a while. It was really quite stunning. I wish that I had a video of it. But I remember thinking about him saying, like, I'm going to do a dance wherever I am until I die. And he did. That's how he lived. Now, I had a lot of friends that were just angry to the end. And you know what? They're right. But Darian was one of these people who was like, I want to dance no matter what is going on. And he inspired a lot of people who came in contact with him to be able to dance no matter what was going on in their lives. And I wish that I wish we had video or interview video with him. It would be lovely. I'm going to talk a little bit about this new ritual. I mentioned I was doing these somatic poetry rituals. I did a ritual. Originally, like I said, these were to ground me in the present. But I started doing them for other reasons. I had a boyfriend who was one of the leaders of ACT UP, the activist group, AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. And he was a little bit older than I was. And anyway, we managed to get through all those years, go to all these funerals, and remain HIV negative. It was like sprinting across a minefield and surviving. And he wanted to go to a queer spiritual community to recuperate. And while he was down there, he was tortured and raped and murdered, burned alive. And it just, my whole life just sort of spun apart thinking about this beautiful human being I loved. And it took me years of processing this violence. That's actually kind of common in the United States, especially now. I'm going to pause to just tell you, because I don't think a lot of people are aware that this is happening. About 3 weeks ago, Donald Trump's new cabinet, they did something that is remarkable. I can't believe they did it. They lifted a ban on surveillance of U.S. citizens based on gender identity and sexual orientation that has, in my lifetime, been there. Like, you've not been allowed to spy on people because of who they are, their sexual orientation, and now you are allowed to. And 3 days after that, because they are coordinating this effort, the school system, the Department of Education, released an online form for students, teachers, parents, and the broader community to spy on anybody who is gay, lesbian, transgender, or queer, and to upload photographs of books in the library or students wearing a rainbow pin. And it's just this terrible situation. I mean, I remember being a younger queer person in a small little town that it was very hard. It was hard enough as it was, but this kind of paranoia is just completely, it's unacceptable. And I don't know what we're supposed to do about it at this point, except be there for one another. But so he was murdered, and it took me years to get to this place where I did a ritual that worked. So I started doing these rituals for other reasons, and I wanted to heal because I was very depressed. And I know a lot of people romanticize art and poetry, that like they do their best work when they're depressed. And I really want us to stop thinking that. It's destructive. It's annihilating, actually. And I also think that it's just based on the fact that when you're depressed, you're focused on this one thing. You know what I mean? Instead of all the things you normally think about, those just disappear. So once we get to the idea that it's actually the focus that it gives you, it's not some magical thing that's giving you your art. Once we realize it's that, well, then we can make the focus whatever we want, whenever we want. It doesn't have to be depression. And this is, anyway, I was very excited that this worked. I went on to use the rituals after that to do other things, flooding my body with the sounds of extinct animals. And then my newest book, which is called Listen to the Golden Boomerang Return, I was working with animals thriving in the Anthropocene, crows, rats, coyotes. But this is where I'm at now, and I wanted to talk about this. It's called First Light. And what I was talking about with the mechanic dance and the deep sea divers is part of it, because I think about people who are working in the sun and how they're oppressed and how they get these diseases and how their bodies are ruined day after day by the things that they're being forced to do to make a living. And I think also about my family and the factories. But one of the things I'm particularly focused on with the sunrise in particular, the sunrise in particular is something I focus on because just as the sun comes up, just before it comes up, these are pictures from Arizona that I recently took when I was in Arizona. Everything that we know, that we can identify, vanishes. Like it's all this blur, all the nouns that make us. This is near my home in Massachusetts where there's still a lot of snow on the ground. And just for a moment, everything disappears. Like before this moment, you can sort of make out things in the dark. It's very interesting. But just before the sun comes up, everything vanishes. And it blurs, like if you squint. And to me, that is this sort of magical place where we get to see everything that we've been as one thing again. And then you open your eyes. That's a church. I saw the sunrise. Did anybody else see the sunrise this morning? It was quite beautiful this morning, wasn't it? This is from Iowa. I particularly like being in the Midwest of the United States because you can see, it's so flat, you can see such a long distance. And it's particularly exciting for this moment I'm talking about because the land and the sky, before those colors arrive, they just blur into this sort of dark moment. Like that. This is one that I took when I was working with Sarah Brown, who you might have seen yesterday. This is from Ireland. Another one from outside my home. The thing is about that sunlight, it's this extraterrestrial vitamins, right? It travels through outer space for about 9 minutes before it hits us. It's our star. And what's exciting to me is there's a sunrise continuously happening. All day long, the sun is rising somewhere. And that's something I like to think about. It's never ending. So, before I get into that, this is Edvard Munch. And this is at the Munch Museum in Oslo. Have you ever seen this painting in person? It's bigger than this room. I mean, it's one of the largest paintings I've ever seen in my life. They built a room just for it. It's so massive. And what I love about this painting is that he's showing us how the vibrations, that light as it gets to us, it's everything. You see everything vibrating. The land, the water, the air is being fed and affected and moved literally by the rays. Nikola Tesla, I almost said Elon Musk, isn't that horrible? And Nikola Tesla, who did not know him, who did not know Elon Musk, Nikola Tesla has this beautiful moment in his writing where he says, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, you need to think in terms of 3 things: energy, vibration, and frequency. And this is exactly what I'm talking about with the sunlight. For instance, I ate some food. I'm speaking into this very interesting device I want to always wear with this little green light, and it's translating everything over here on the screen. It's very odd. And this little green cyclops friend, critter. And where was I? Oh, so yes, I ate some food earlier. That's the energy. Oh, critter. Critter, critter, critter. Does it say it? How about that? Critter. So, critter with a capital C? Yeah, there you go. So that's the energy, and the energy gives my jaws and my larynx and the air in my lungs the ability to make the vibration, to send the frequency of my words out for your ears. You know, you now have to like translate that through your body. And I just love this idea of those three things always working together: energy, vibration, and frequency. This painting, more than anything I've ever seen, really captures that moment where it's all coming together. So I watch the sunrise wherever I'm at on the planet. And then later on the day, I watch the sunrise again on an outdoor public webcam. This is in Singapore. I love this one in Singapore because the sun comes up and those buildings just sort of like glow immediately in these bright colors. And this is in Kenya at a wildlife preserve. This is Mecca. This one is particularly exciting to watch. Now the thing is, it's not pointed at the sky, but why I love watching this is because everybody on the Hajj, everybody in there giving their prayers in the morning, they are wearing white. And when the colors of the sun bathe across them, because it's open, you know, it's open in the air, it's just magical seeing the way that the sun, this is literally just before the sunrise, is this moment. This is in Jamaica. This one's very good because you can see when the sun comes up in the distance, like it's got all that glare from the ocean, and then it just bathes the entire streets with these colors. It's very different than if you see it like in a place that's landlocked, where the colors kind of like they get a bit muted. But with this one, I think because of the ocean and the sky working together with the light, like the light just comes almost like streaming down the streets. And this is in England, this castle I like to watch the sunrise with. It looks like a very lonely castle, aren't they? Lonely looking. And this is Melbourne, Australia. So what I intend to do is when I come to the end of this, which will probably be in the fall at some point, I'm going to stitch all my webcams together and watch the sunrise 24 hours. I'm not interested in like extreme sports or anything like that. It's just, I just want to do it once while I'm alive, you know, just watch the sunrise all day long. And then immediately go to the doctor's office and be hypnotized, which my Irish grandmother said won't work for us, but, you know, she was very proud of that. But to see if I can be hypnotized, see if I can go back into time to remember the first time I saw sunlight as a child, and then write one last poem. So I'm going to share a few poems from this. I dedicate these poems to, do you all know who Bernadette Mayer was? She's really wonderful. For Bernadette Mayer, 1945 to 2022, the lightning strike of your genius will forever vibrate in the fertile ground of poetry. So these three that I'm about to read are very, very new. You are designed to travel from mud of despair to the dance floor. There are no answers not already given to grief. I only near miss you now. Stop slicing between two kinds of thinking. Let the solid parts go liquid. Huddled in foyer too long. Get in here, please. Tell us about the love. There is a welcome posture the sun does. I wait for it. Hold myself against it all day. Hang a string on my ear with a note saying, let's get this place cracking. Your encouragement was everything. At first I thought, your tiny sponge was no match for my muddy window. I want to be the friend who accepts your gifts. Sing with wind as though it is a duet. Then suddenly it is. The U.S. government says my pronoun is so difficult to pronounce Patriots are exempt from saying it to protect their stupid faces. They also claim the weapons industry sustains lives and careers. I say irony, and they think I added a Y chromosome to iron and get upset. I asked the character cut from the play if we should kill another character to make room for them to join again. They said, "But why would I want to give up this freedom?" Good for you, I say. Just ask for the password in a dream. So that is the presentation. And I was wondering if anybody had any questions or comments or joyful things to say, annoying things, anything you want. I don't care. Oh. See, they stand on the bottom of the page, so they dance. Let's go back to the sunflower. Or the cats. We like those. Yes, you have a question? Oh. Oh. Just one second.
So you told us about these rituals that you do to feel more present. Could you describe maybe one of these rituals? Because I was really interested in it.
Oh, sure. Well, one of them was with the sunlight. But yeah, why don't I tell you the first ones I did? So when I first came up with this idea, I wasn't sure what to do. And I thought, well, you know, one of the things I like to do is go to these big corporate bookstores. I don't buy anything there. But I go because they always have the most up-to-date books. And I go to the business section. And in the business section, there's this small subcategory about marketing research. And it's this, they're studying our behavior. It's very strange. It's like this form of anthropology, but in a creepy capitalist way. But they find out a lot of very strange things about us. And one of the things that I had been reading just before this crisis, where I realized that I was not connected like these new friends, was about human interaction. And they claim that as much as 80 to 90% of our communication is nonverbal, which I find remarkable. So I thought, okay, well, how can I use that? So when I knew I wanted to do these rituals to anchor myself in the present, I found a red wig and a dumpster behind a beauty academy, you know, where you go to learn how to do nails and give people perms. And it was a long red wig, and it went down to my waist. And so I thought, I'm going to eat a different color of food every day, each day, and wear that color. I went through the spectrum, red, orange, yellow, you know. So I started with red. So the red poem was the very first one. And so I thought, well, I'll wear this wig. And it was a very strange-looking wig because it was half very straight, and the other half was very badly permed. So it was sort of hanging. It was like this. And very frizzy, broken. It was like a mess. I don't know why it was in the dumpster. I think they got in trouble, or I don't know. But I thought, well, if I wear this wig around town, I'll get a lot of nonverbal communication. And I did. Because most of the people just like get walking around me as far as they could. But I learned two very important things on that first evening when I was busy taking the notes. See, what I do is when I'm in the middle of the ritual, I'm just taking these notes, endless notes. And you know, see these little poems of mine, there's just like this tiny bit of the language. Most of it I don't use. So while I was going through all the notes to find the poem, I realized two things. One that made me very happy was that it worked. I was present all day long. And I believe that it was the most present I had ever been in my life writing a poem at this point. And that's strange because I've been writing for many years at this point, you know. But, so that made me happy. But the second thing that might be even more exciting was I realized that that ritual created that poem, meaning that I would have never written that poem at any other time for any other reason. The ritual orchestrates the language for the poem. And so that was very exciting. It's like busy work for the muse, you know? How's that for an example? But I've done many of them, like talking to trees, plants. There's so many things that we can do. So many things to do while we're alive, you know? Anything else? Yes.
I just would like to ask about the shapes of your poems, if you want to. I mean, I have my own interpretation, but I would like to.
Thank you for asking. Remember I said earlier that I absolutely believe in the spirits around us. I don't even question it anymore. I had no intention of ever making my poems look like this. I was used to just having them on the left margin. And then from that very first poem, the red poem that I was just telling you about, when I would try to work the poem out on paper, I would feel like, I thought it was coming down with a flu, a virus. I thought it was, sick, some kind of cold or something. And then I would walk away from it and it would go away. And then I would come back to it and I eventually just started intuitively, like I listened to my intuition. Like it's hard to listen to your intuition. Most of us never do, But I was like, you know what, I'm having this feeling that I should move them off that margin. And as I started to do that, I didn't feel like throwing up. I feel like these ghosts were like jamming their fists down my throat, being like, stop it, And then when I woke up the next morning, just as I was waking, this voice came. It was like just at the edge of the dream or after I don't know where. It was very strange. And it said, we've been trying to show you the way out of the violence of the line. You humans are obsessed with these straight lines. There's nothing like these don't even exist in nature, really. And so I thought, oh, okay. And I just surrendered to it. I don't know what they're going to look like. They all stand on the bottom of the page because they want that. Now, my latest book that just came out, Listen to the Golden Boomerang Return, I'm really interested in the number 9 because, each of these numbers, 0 to 9, they're created by magicians thousands of years ago. They're hieroglyphs. They're little drawings that have very specific spiritual meanings. And 9 is the epiphany. It's going up the spinal cord and it's circulating in the cranium, your thoughts. It means when things coalesce, things come together, like almost in a sudden burst of reality, epiphany. And so I work with anything, and you can't destroy 9. You'd multiply 9 and then you can heal it. 2 times 9 is 18, 1 plus 8 is 9. 3 times, 9 is 27, 2 plus 7, 36, 45, all of it. But this poem was this long poem, 72 parts. And I accidentally wrote 73 poems, pieces, to this. And I was like, oh no, this is not good. So I ripped one of them up and fed those pieces to the other poems. I worked it in. And I had a dream that night when I turned in the manuscript to my publisher that I came home from grocery shopping and 6 of my poems were on my bed having really hardcore sex, wild, sodomy, just really intense. And they weren't speaking. I was like, they're made of words, why don't they speak? And they were grunting. It was this really intense grunting physical thing. And they finally saw me and started shooting letters at me. They were angry. I was like, what's the matter with them? And one of them galloped to the edge of the bed to get a clear aim at my face. But when I woke up, I realized those were the 6 poems that I fed the other poem to. So it was like I was having this relationship. I don't know. There was a time I think they would have thrown me away into some insane asylum for talking like this, but we're not at that time period, so I'm okay. And it's great to have that kind of, you make it the center of your life, what you're doing, your art, and it's going to be in everything you do. And I thought, all right, well, there's still going to be 72 poems, but, get to live with your poems in new ways. And then I started imagining having the poems off the page. And that's when these shows started happening with the poems that are really tall and they're on wood sculptures. And I love that. Yeah, I'm going to have a show in London in May. So. But I just love being able to have the poems off the page, live in another way, their bodies, Anybody else?
Yes, I would like to ask.
Ah, Sandy.
I would love to know how your poems changed over 50 years.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I was a very young poet, my poems were very verbose, too many words, lots of words. And it's because as a young person, I wanted to make sure the reader understood exactly what I meant. You know, I was constantly it was terrible. I might as well just wrote novels, you know, and given up. But I realized around that same time that was not possible. Nobody was ever going to understand what I meant, because everybody in this room is unique from our experiences. All of our experiences are these layers, and we're building this lens that we're looking at the world through, and it's only your lens. So that means when you look at one of my poems, you're looking at it through your lens and your experiences. So you translate that poem through yourself. So once I realized that, I was so excited. It was one of the most exciting days of my life, actually. And I thought, oh, I can just strip away all this language. And that's why the poems are so small. I just get rid of almost any adjectives. I'm like, no, you know. I take the poems, I work on them for a long time until they sort of fall apart, and then I put them back just so they hold together. Because I want all that space, like all that space on the page is for the reader. You know what I mean? This is for you. All that empty space. It's not empty, because you're filling it in. And you're putting things together with your imagination. I could ignore the audience. And I know that sounds like a terrible thing, but I mean it in a different way. I mean it in a very loving, trusting way. Meaning that I trust the audience will get what they want. So that was great, and that for me to have that moment. And then after that, my poems were always the economy of the language is always very stripped down, which makes me happy. Because I want people, you know, when I meet people who say they hate reading poetry, I don't say it out loud, but I say to myself, oh, well, they must be lazy, you know. Because if you're reading poetry, you are doing work. It's one thing to read a novel. There's nothing, by the way, if you're a novelist, don't be angry. They're always angry at me for these things. I don't have any intention of making novelists angry. But it's just the case. You know, you're writing a novel and you're following the story. You're going on a little ride, you know. But with poetry, you don't have that. That's not happening. You can't just do that. You have to fill in the blanks. You're putting all these corresponding ideas together and building the bridge. And then you're creating this. You're co-creating with the poet. And I love that. I love that when you're reading poetry, you're part of it. And I know we're considered the ugly cousins of the art world, but I don't care. You know what I mean? It doesn't bother me. Anything else? Oh, yes.
Can I ask a kind of related question, which is, so in the kind of stripping back of the language, do you think about metaphor? Like, where is that sort of place of difference or image?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, metaphor, you know, it comes and goes, and it really, you know, the thing is, I want to leave that up to you. You know, I'm giving you the bit pieces that you're going to find what is it. Because I honestly, if I were to ask everybody in this room where the metaphor is, it might be different, you know. Maybe it's because it has a completely different set of meanings and structures, and I don't know. I try to get out of the poem. Even when there's the personal I, when I'm talking, using mine, I'm still like leaving it very, very thin body of language so that you can get in there. It's a magical thing to read poetry. You know, read poetry. I read poetry every day. I don't really like reading anything else because it just kind of bores me to read sentences and just be like, okay, where are we going? You know, I feel like I'm being led by my nose, you know, down the road. And I just, see, this is why novelists do not like me. I was at a dinner party early this year, and oh my God, a novelist was a little drunk, screaming at me, leaving. I was like, I'm born to ruin parties, you know? I don't know what's the matter with me. Is there anything else? Anybody? Oh, one more?
I wanted to ask about the rituals that you talked about. If they situate you in the present, do you also think or believe or intend for them to situate the writing that comes from them also in the present? Or it becomes like it adds a different timeline to them? That would be interesting for me to know.
So if I'm in the present with the ritual, is the writing present?
Yeah, is the writing that comes out of it also situated in the present? Or is it reflective or looking into the future, or like, I don't know, it's like it presents a cyclical, you know?
That's a good question. I just allow whatever's coming out at that point. The ritual literally is just this machine I get inside of that I keep recreating in different ways to let the language happen. And so sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Like the ritual I did for my boyfriend after he was murdered, to get over that, it's a series of 27 poems that a lot of it is memory-based. So, but the thing is that I was present in the ritual, you see. So the writing can be, it's one thing to write about the past, but it's another thing to be absolutely present while doing it. And the things that I was doing for that ritual, I couldn't be anything but present. Does that make sense?
It does to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, one more question right behind you.
Yeah, thank you. I want to ask you about class and poetry.
Yes.
Because it seemed like I teach poetry in a university setting, and I come from a background where, growing up, I didn't read poetry, but I love poetry. And it's interesting to me to hear your story about how you came to poetry as a way of, or like a consequence of escaping from that, the kind of machinic mindset of the factory, of living in the past or the future, and the kind of oppressive temporality of the state of the body. And it seems to me that like we live in an era where we're afraid of poetry, right? Where I don't know if it's like laziness, but it's more that readers are scared of poetry because they've only encountered poetry in an educational setting that has not served the needs that they have. And then at the same time, I'm thinking in the context of like institutional cuts to the arts and humanities and policy cuts, there's also a fear of what poetry can do that is hiding behind these cuts, and then these cuts masquerade as, well, poetry is a luxury for the people who you might have met at the MFA, teaching the MFA, who came from a background that had that, in order to hide what poetry can do. And I just wondered, like, as someone who's also from that background, who's both a poet and an educator, how do we resist that fear of poetry?
Well, I think resisting it is, the fact of writing it and sharing it, but I think that it also depends on where we're at on the planet. I think, the poet Cecilia Vicuña? She's remarkable. She has this film called What is Poetry to You? And she went all over Latin America with this film crew. This is back in the 70s she made this film. Now in the United States, even back then, poetry was, as you say, it's an elitist thing, But that's just something that because you're right, poetry is dangerous. It really gets your imagination going. So when you're living in a culture like the United States where they just want you to work and consume, they don't want you involving your talents in any way, It's dangerous. But if you go where she was going, she spoke to everybody on the street. And every person she spoke to said, oh, I just love poetry. And they would talk about their favorite poems. And she even spoke to some police officers who were like, our jobs are very stressful. We like to read poetry at night. It was kind of amazing seeing this film. So yeah, the class structure is what we're talking about here. And the class structure is, poetry is the enemy of that. It always has been. I mean, think about Plato, when he's in Ion, that period, right? He literally says, you can look this up. Plato says that the poets should be exiled from the city limits. Now, it doesn't sound like anything now. You're like, whatever, so we go to the suburbs of Amsterdam. No. If you're exiled from the city limits in ancient Greece, it's certain death. That's why Socrates was given the choice of exile or killing himself. He chose to kill himself. And so you have to have done something pretty awful for somebody to say that to a whole group of people. And I keep in mind, Plato, everything that we know, it's all these public speeches he's giving. And he's talking about his idea of democracy. And of course, what's his idea of democracy? You have to own land. Women can't vote. It's good to own slaves. He has said this, it's good for the republic to own slaves. And these poets are in the audience like, wait a minute. What is this nonsense you're saying? What is this democracy bullshit of yours, about like, oh, it's good to have slaves? And and he just hated the poets so much. He would say these terrible things. From the very beginning, poets have been the enemy of these structures from the beginning. So, we remain that. I don't really know what else to say. Music, music is poetry. Music is constantly doing that, right? Rap music, rock and roll, like everything's just constantly feeding people's imaginations with these poems set to music. Yes, Mia.
I guess since the microphone's here, I want to ask a question also. And following from what you were saying, I loved your account of the section from the book Machine Paralysis about the mechanic and the dance to welcome a new body, and how then the village gathers to celebrate how you are now. That's really beautiful to me, and that seems to me also to be, I started seeing your poems anew as being, the poems as being this new body that we're all gathering as readers to celebrate. So thank you for this new way of looking at poetry reading, actually, as this kind of celebration or this kind of village party to celebrate the new body that's there. And I was wondering about, I've heard you talk a few times about the endless notes that you take after a ritual, and then how the poem emerges from that. And I was wondering if, I can't help but wonder if that moment of seeing the first light or the dawn, is that equivalent to how the poem emerges to you from the notes, or is that a completely separate or different process?
Metaphor, like we were saying, definitely. So, awakening. I feel like I'm constantly waking up every day. Poetry, to me, my favorite poems are the poems that help me see the world in a new way. That's a really big task to fill. It's a big job. But I feel that that's what my favorite poems do. Like I read it, I'm like, wow, now I feel completely different about something. And dawning, that's what it is. It's like all the nouns vanish, and then there's this light that's suddenly. The other thing that's very interesting about the sunrise is no matter where I'm at on the planet, it's darkness and total silence. And once just the moment the light appears, birds start singing. It's quite exciting. I don't think I answered your question, Mia.
No, that was beautiful. That was great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.